Hey guys, this video is going to go over the process of first scouting for this 2025 Reefscape season and how we analyze our Tableau insights. Starting off with our pit scouting app. How this works is we have a Google Sheets where we gave a header to all the different values we want, and we connected this Google Sheets to App Sheets, and it created all these values from the dummy data we have created over here. And if we add a new input, it automatically updates the Google Sheets. Same with the Match Scouting app. This is the Google Sheets that's connected to the Match Scouting app with all the different headers that we have for the values we want. And here's the Match Scouting app. I'll show you an example. If I put in some random data in the Match Scouting app, and right now we're at 17 rows, it's going to add another row at the bottom. Let's see. Now that we have submitted a data value, let's see if it updated the Match Scouting app. There you go. It opened up a new row to the 18th row, and you can see that the values that we put are exactly what we had in there as well. So now, what do we do with this data? Well, for the pit scouting app data, we can see the view over here in the app itself. So if we want a specific detail about team 2079, I would just have to click it and it shows me the error information over here. But for the match scouting data, seeing the data from the list isn't very helpful since there's a lot of values and it's kind of hard to defer. So for the match scouting data, we connected Tableau to give us insights and graphs on how the data is actually formatted, and it makes the graphs easier to analyze for us to get insights from it. So if I open up our Tableau for the Match Scouting app, we'll see this. And what it does, it makes all of our values over here. It's called our data source, and it puts all of our values we have over here, and it puts all the headings that we had up over here. Scroll, we'll get all of that. And it categorizes it by its type. For team number, it's text. Your initial is text, match number text. Color, it makes it a Boolean because it's a true or false thing, and it just does that for everything else. And then for these are numbers, so it marks it as a number. It continues the rest. And then as we get to the end, the last one we had in the app was the alliance score. After that, we have calculations, which I created myself in the Tableau app to create a value which we will be using to do some calculations, such as the team count. The team count shows how many times that one team came up during the event, which should essentially be 12 when we actually have the event season. Since this is dummy data, it's not accurate. Now, moving on, we have average autocorrel points, which adds up all the autocorrel points and divides it by how many there are. And same thing with everything else. It does that for every value that we created. And now we created multiple, if I scroll at the bottom, we created multiple graphs that we can use to analyze our data, and I organized it in these thing called stories in the Tableau app. And one of the stories we have is general values. So in general values, I have 3 stories, and to go between stories I can just do like this. General values is one story, and these are the different graphs in that story. So we have the graph no-show, which shows us a percentage of how much percent did this robot not show. So if we look at 2079, it shows that 25% of the time the team 2079 didn't show up. Same thing with breakdown. Breakdown is also a percentage, and if we see all the teams at the bottom, if we check on team 777, we can see that 50% of the time team 777 broke down. And if you look to the right hand side, you'll see filters. So this top part is a team number filter, so we can select what team we want to see. If I want to see 777, I get that. If I want to see team 7, I get that. But for team 7, it doesn't show a value because they didn't have a value for breakdown percentage because they broke down 0 times according to our dummy data. That's how that works. And same thing with match number, we can see how much it happened for that particular to that one match number. And if we move on to the next one in general values, we have auto points versus teleop points, which is a comparison between our auto points versus our teleop points. So basically it says the average auto points versus the average teleop points, and it lists all of the little dots represent all of the teams in that match. In that event. And the ones at this top right area are the bestest teams according to the comparison of average auto points versus average teleop points. And according to our dummy data, we can see that team 2222 is best in this area. Moving on, we have a story called Auto, and we have three graphs in the auto story. First one is total points. Team 333 has average auto points of 47. That's how much they get on average for auto. And it just says that for the rest of them. And you can see that they're color coded as well. So green is like really, really good, and red is like bad. And yellow, light green, all that kind of stuff is mid. And cross line percentage, 2079, cross the line 75% of the time. That's how that works. And same with preload. Preload isn't very much a necessary point, but it helps if we have it. And it is 75% of the time for team 2079. And same thing, you have filters on the side if you want to see a specific team number. If I only want to see team 2079's value, I can open it up like that. Filters happen on the same thing for everything. Next story is the auto comparison dashboard. If I move on to that, it shows me the auto comparison of net shot points versus processor shot points for the algae, in average, of course. And the top right corner are like the top best teams in this field, which is team 10. Moving on, we have net shot placed versus processor shot placed for algae and auto. And that's basically how many algae they scored. First one was how many points they got, and second one was how many algae they scored. It doesn't really make a difference, but it helps us differentiate the values. Same thing over here for algae points versus coral points, and algae placed versus coral placed. And top right is the bestest ones. If moving on to auto coral dashboard, we have all the different levels and their points. So right now, this is a level 1 average auto coral scored or placed, and we can see that team 2079 has placed 2 on average for auto. Moving on, this is level 1P, and that stands for level 1 points. And if we check all the team numbers and all the match numbers, we can see that team 2079 has an average auto coral level 1 point of 6 points. Same thing for the rest of them. And at the end, you have total points, which is average auto coral total points, how much they got on average just for scoring coral in points. And we have drop or miss. So how many coral did they drop or did they miss? Team 2222 on average dropped or missed 3 corals. And the next one is drop or miss percentage. And we can say that team 2877 had an 8.33 percentage of dropping or missing, which is a good thing because you don't want to drop or miss that much. Moving on to auto algae dashboard, it's the same thing as the previous one, just for algae. First one is processor shot. On average, how many algae did they shoot into the processor? Next one is processor shot P, which stands for processor shot points, which is how many points they got for scoring it. Next is net shot, same thing. This is net shot placed, or how many they shooted in the net shot. And net shot P is net shot points, how many points on average did they get. And next is total points, how many auto average algae total points did they get in average. Same with removed from reef, which is basically de-algifying, so how many they de-algified on average. Drop or miss is how many algae they dropped or they missed while scoring, and drop or miss percentage is how many they dropped or missed on percentage. So team 2222 dropped or missed 25% of the time during this competition. Moving on to teleop, it shows the average teleop points, which is coral plus algae scored in total, so that's that. And then you have human net shot is whenever an algae gets through into the processor, a human can take that algae and score it into the barge. This counts how many they have for the human net shot. And same with defense, how much percentage of the time does a team play defense? And we can see that team 2079 plays defense 25% of the time during matches. Moving on, we have teleop comparison dashboard, which we have 4 graphs in. The first graph explains the net shot points versus the processor shot points in comparison. So we can see that the top right corner is best at this specific area, which is team 10. And this is points. Moving on is how many they placed or how many they scored. Next is algae points versus coral points. And finally, we have algae placed versus coral placed during teleop. Moving on, we have teleop coral dashboard, which is the same thing as the auto. It's just for teleop. The P stands for points. Everything else is placed or how many they scored. And then we got on to total points, which is average teleop coral total points, drop or miss, and drop or miss percentage. And yeah. And then we have teleop algae dashboard, which is the same thing as auto, just for teleop, everything's the same. We also have removed from reef, which is the same, and drop or miss percentage. And then now we move on to endgame dashboard. We have a total of 7 graphs in endgame dashboard, and the first one is total points, so average endgame points. And we have total done, which is how many on average did they do instead of points. And we have deep points versus shallow points, which is a comparison. And the one on the top right is the one that does it best, which is team number 7. And the next one is the same thing, but instead of how many points on average, it's a comparison between how many they did. And same thing for deep climb and shallow climb. It just shows the percentage of how many times they did it, as well as park. Finally, moving on to the last storyboard. This is the individual scores graph, and it shows how many teams on average was their robot scored during a match. And these numbers are going all the way to 200 because they're dummy data and it wasn't inputted correctly, but in the actual competition, it will be correct and more accurate and reasonable. So you can see that it goes from green, which is the best, to red, which is lower. Moving on to match graph. This one's a bit more confusing, but it makes sense in the long run. We have match number 1, which you can see at the top, and match number 1 had teams 78, 20, 79. In an actual match, there would be 6 teams, but for our purposes, we're just gonna keep it like this because of the dummy data. And it shows how much each team put effort into it in that specific match, adding up all the values that our scouter put into the scouting app. And it does the same thing for the rest of the matches. Next one is a lose percentage. How much of the time does this team lose? And same thing with tie. How much of percentage does this team tie? Same thing with win. And there you have it. That's how we analyze our Tableau data. And we're going to be changing these graphs later on, especially when we get more into the competitions, because then we'll know what values we'll actually need and are most important for us to analyze and select for our match selections for scouting. Thank you.